Let's continue with the idea of balance and logic and harmony and gesture as characteristics of the Renaissance, in addition to the use of chiaroscuro and linear perspective and atmospheric perspective when we look at our next artwork. It's Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. Now let's look through this title here because there's a lot going on, I know. So the artist is Leonardo da Vinci. The title is The Last Supper. It is painted on a wall using oil and tempera paint on the plaster wall. And it is still in its original location, which is the refectory of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan. What's a refectory? Ah, great question, student. I'm so glad you asked. A refectory is a eating hall. Think of it almost like a cafeteria that monks would eat in, and it's connected to the church. It's connected to the larger monastery. So here we are looking at the refectory of Santa Maria delle Grazie. There are two doors right here, and then imagine this to have been filled with tables and monks eating, and then the walls would also have been elaborately decorated in beautiful paintings and scenes. It was not uncommon for a monk's refectory to have a scene of the Last Supper. So let's just get that out of the way. Leonardo da Vinci is not the first to paint a Last Supper. It's just that his Last Supper is one of the most popular. But the idea of seeing the Last Supper is a scene in which Jesus and his followers are sharing a meal together just before he is arrested and then persecuted. It is a common subject in a monk's refectory where the monks are also eating with their fellow monks. Got it? Okay. The reason why the refectory of Santa Maria delle Grazie is missing a lot of frescoes is because, well, it was bombed during World War II. Here we are at the outside of it, and you can go visit it today. It is open to the public, but you have to buy your ticket well in advance, and they are closed on Mondays. I tell you that because I did not get to see it when I was in Milan. I was only in Milan on a Monday. Yes, it's very sad. But back to its bombing. It was bombed in World War II. Here we are looking at it from the outside. So we were just standing on this street corner right here, and then this square here, this is the cloister where the monks would be sleeping and living out most of their day. And then the Last Supper is located back in here. So what's this bombing thing, Miss Cortez? Yeah, Allied forces, during their heavy attacks on Italy, destroyed the Last Supper's refectory. So here is an image of it prior to the bombing. You can see that the monks and civilians had gathered together to protect Leonardo's wall as best they could. Here's some sandbags and some bracers. You can see in this photograph the original frescoes and wood paneling that were on the outsides of the Last Supper wall. And here we see the complete destruction of the refectory. Miraculously, the Last Supper was saved, intact. And so when we look at the refectory today, yeah, let me go back up here. What historians and restoration architects decided to do was rebuild the space with the paintings that were still intact, but the walls that had been destroyed, rather than rebuilding and then repainting them, they have been left blank so that we know all that was lost. Additionally, when we look at Da Vinci's Last Supper, here it is today, we need to take into consideration that a lot of this painting is missing. What? Miss Cortez, you just said that most of this painting was missing. I get it. Yeah. No. What I mean is Leonardo loved oil paint, right? You see that oil paint? When he painted this, he was using oil paint and tempera paint on plaster. Plaster, which is water-based. Does oil mix well with water? No. And the choice that he made for oil paint was exactly what we've been talking about. He loved the luminous quality, he loved the modulations. However, almost immediately after he finished painting this, it began to flake off. And there were letters and notes from monks being like, this was just done like a couple years ago and it's already starting to fall apart, starting to crumble. So when we look at this painting, we need to take into consideration that a lot of it, some estimate about 80% of the finer details are gone, lost, not here anymore. Let's look at it up close. So what do we see and what are we missing? What we see is a long table in the center, balancing the left and the right side, is Jesus. Now, the Last Supper is the story in which Jesus and his 12 disciples enjoy a meal, and Jesus announces that one of his followers will betray him. And that is the moment that we're seeing here. It is the moment he has announced that one of his closest friends will betray him. And we see the chaos erupt. We see people and their reactions. Now, there on either side, there are 6 on the left, 6 on the right. Yes, balance. And then the rest of the room we see is clearly defined with a coffered timber ceiling. So this kind of box squared roof or ceiling structure. And then these brown rectangles. These were actually tapestries. Think of them as elaborate weavings that would have had these beautiful designs placed in them, but all of those designs now lost because they've flaked off. Here, a little bit of detail. So you can see what has remained. There's that beautiful hazy mountain background, and then the reactions of his followers. The meal has been placed before them, and I need you to use your imagination that all of these small elements would have been easily identifiable as food, and more specific, what kinds of foods they were. The goblets and the plates, all of these small details now lost. This is a dramatization, an artist's rendering of how it may have appeared originally. Originally, it was placed above the wood paneling in the back of the room. And using our understanding of his preference for oil paint and highlights and midtones and shadows, what we can see is this gorgeous display of light and shadow. The light within the painting is consistent with the light that would filter in through the refractory. So the light would come into the space and would bounce off of the walls and the figures in the painting just as it would in the physical space. So while the figures are elevated above the wood paneling, it would still seem quite realistic to those who were sitting down to a meal inside of the refractory. So what characteristics of the Renaissance do we see when we look at the Last Supper? Here, let me help you out. What do we see? Aha! I heard one of you, you said linear perspective. More specifically, what we're looking at here is 1-point perspective, because there is a single point, the single vanishing point behind Jesus's head. So we have linear perspective, 1-point perspective, and those orthogonals are very clearly defined by the tapestries, by the ceiling line, and carry through to radiate from and towards Jesus. Remember the symbolism of that? We saw that in Masaccio's work, where everything is coming into the back of his head, not to be disrespectful, but as a symbol that everything begins and ends with Jesus. Here, I sometimes will put in these images by artists that remove the main figures from paintings, and I love this one here. This is by, you can see his name, Bensei Hajdu. And it helps us really understand the space that these figures occupy. What's another characteristic when we don't have the figures in it? Let me help you out. Yes, atmospheric perspective. So even without the figures in this scene, we are given a very clear foreground, middle ground, and background way back there. Let's add some people into the scene. Okay, here we are. What other characteristics of the Renaissance do you see? Let me give you a hint. Pyramids. Yes, pyramidal composition. So Leonardo not only divides the space evenly with 6 on one side, 6 on the other, but even those groupings have a bracketing of 3s. So we see these 3 nestle together, these 3 nestle together, these 3, these 3. So we have this pyramidal composition of stability. So let's now think about that. I've told you that a pyramidal composition is a visual stability. It adds a sense of weight and balance to these figures, their arrangement. Leonardo is doing this 4 times. I mean, 5 times if you think of Jesus as his own single pyramid. He's creating a lot of stability in this scene because the moment that Leonardo has chosen to depict here is the moment in which there is absolute chaos. Jesus has just announced, one of you will betray me, and everybody is freaking out. If we look closer, you can follow along using gesture and see their reactions. Like this guy here, he's like, it is not me. What are you telling us? This man here whispering, did you just hear? And then look at his gesture, leads us into the next pyramid. And in this one, we see one guy going, I can't believe this is happening. And we're like, yeah, I know. And then that gesture leads us this way. On the opposite side, look at here. These 3 men, their pyramid. Who do you think it is? You know who I think it is? Oh, I can't believe this is happening. And then look at that gesture leading us. Here, is it me? Did I do something? Is it my accident? Oh, this guy, you just tell me what's going on. I'm gonna cry. So we have this chaotic scene that is being controlled by the composition. And then the gestures help to lead us through. Okay. Chiaroscuro is another characteristic, which awkwardly we can't see very well. I'm sorry for the scrolling. But I say awkwardly because a lot of the light and shadow has been flaked off. So let's just say, yes, it had chiaroscuro. Okay, so we got balance. Balance is logic and harmony. We have pyramidal compositions that create this sense of stability. And we have gestures, which help lead us around this scene, this moment, right? Now, as I said, Leonardo is not the first person to paint a Last Supper. It's a very common subject in a refectory. But what Leonardo's done differently is he's created that moment of chaos in which we don't see who is the betrayer. Now, if you're not familiar with this, Judas, one of his closest followers, Judas is the one who betrayed him. And typically, in a scene of the Last Supper, it would be quick to identify the betrayer, Judas. Like in this example here. This is by an early Italian Renaissance artist. His name is Andrea del Castagno, and this is his Last Supper. And it's very similar to what we see in Leonardo's, but also very different. So we have followers of Jesus along a very long table, sure. Here, this is it. And then we're going to zoom in on it. Now, while it's similar in composition with the figures placed along the table, there is one figure who is on the opposite side. That is Judas. He is on the wrong side. He is left out. It is quick to identify the odd man out, the betrayer in this scene. It is not the case in Leonardo's. Instead, we are left to guess. And in the guessing of where Judas is, we are stabilized using the pyramidal composition. So now you tell me, where is Judas? While you think about which one is Judas in comparison to a more typical Last Supper. This Last Supper is in Florence. It's at a convent, the convent of Santa Apollonia. And just for our own reference, it's right here. So we've been hanging out at the Palazzo. There's Santa Maria Novella. It's right up there. Okay, back to traditional Last Supper versus, and there's Judas, the bad guy, the betrayer of Jesus. And then here. Okay, so which one? There's no clear identification. Instead, Leonardo makes you wander through the chaos using gesture. Now, if we were in class together, I'd ask you, I'd say, which one do you think? You think it's this guy? This guy right here, holding his hands up, going, oh, it's not me, it's not me. Okay, good guess, good guess. What about you? Oh, you think it's this guy? This guy? What did you just say? I don't believe this. This is crazy. Can't be true. You think it's this guy? Looks mad. No, he knows me. Which one is it? It's difficult unless you already know the answer, because many of the clues were in oil paint and they've now disappeared. So let me show you. It's this man here. This is Judas. Now, there are several factors that help us identify him as Judas. One is that he is turned away from the light. He's in shadow. So the light is on his right side, but his face is in shadow. He's hiding something. Also, if we look at gestures, while all of these fingers are leading us through the scene, his hands are doing two things. One hand, his right hand, is grabbing a purse of coins. This is the money that he was paid to betray Jesus. So he's already gotten his reward. and he's clenching on to that money purse. His other hand is reaching out for the bread. So in the middle of this moment where everybody's freaking out, he's hungry, he's eating, he's like, whoa, this is crazy. Because he knows he's the betrayer. Also, bread is often used as a symbol for the body of Christ, the physical body of Christ. And here he is taking the bread, taking away the body of Christ. So all of these elements are not only characteristic of the Renaissance, but they also speak to the talent of Leonardo and his ability to storytell through gesture and to create a space and stabilize the viewer using composition and line.